This is such a sick way to transfer money. Musk's ex agrees to pay about $10 million to settle Trump lawsuit. Trump just running around and suing every single social media platform whose CEO he's like best friends with. This is like the best way ever to just print money as the president, I guess. Jesus. For violating his First Amendment right by banning his account. Chat, call your local congressman and tell them not to help the Republicans pass a budget. What's the point of a sanctuary city? Can illegals just do any crime? No, what do you mean? If you do a crime, you're still charged like normal. You just don't get referred to the feds if you're... They don't refer you if they think you're undocumented or whatever. They don't do like a citizenship check or whatever. Musk just went in and stole New York FEMA funds from their bank account. New York City Comptroller Brad Lander released the following statement. This morning, my financial team shockingly uncovered that President Trump and his crony Elon Musk illegally executed a revocation of $80 million in congressionally approved FEMA funding from New York City's bank accounts late yesterday afternoon. This is money that the federal government previously dispersed for shelter and services and is now missing. This highway robbery of our funds directly out of our bank account is a betrayal of everyone who calls New York City home. Really? This was just published today? What, a few hours ago? Did you see Congressman David Schweikert speak on the House floor about the national debt and U.S. spending? First rep I have seen in a while that wasn't talking nonsense. 41 minutes. What the fuck?
For anyone listening, whether it be staff, another member, anyone that actually gives a darn, give me your first 4 minutes. Because the first 4 minutes is I need to explain why we've been joking about it in a dark way.
Wait, maybe I'll watch this in a second. Hold on. Mitch McConnell voted no on Tulsi Gabbard. Wow. Not that I don't think it mattered, but...
If I was to ask you what weighs more, a pound of feathers or a pound of gold, what would you tell me?
Pound is a pound.
You'd be wrong, because
Really?
there's 16 ounces in a pound of feathers, and there's 12 ounces, different ounces in a pound of gold.
How come?
Just the way it is.
So when you buy a pound of gold, you're not getting 16 ounces?
You're getting 12 troy ounces.
What nationality invented that? I don't want to go full Kanye here.
Well, it's just he's just using a different unit of measurement. That's like saying, what do you think is more expensive? $10 at Starbucks or $10 at what's that stupid fucking coffee place in Canada? I don't remember what it's called. Hortons. And you're like, I don't know, it's probably the same. Yeah, Timmy's. And they're like, no, because the $10 you spend at Hortons is Canadian dollars, and the $10 that you spend in the U.S. is U.S. dollars, and they're different. And it's like, okay, I guess you got me. Okay. The reality is that the 4 ounces that are missing are being siphoned by Democrats for illegal immigrants.
In the West Wing swearing in Tulsi Gabbard, and so I just came straight back here. So
We already watched all this. What is this? This was the campaign manager for Jill Stein. Yes, of course Trump is bad. There was no illusion that he would be terrible. Electing Harris would have been worse. We can fight Trump. Through mutual aid, through civil disobedience, through active resistance and organizing, we can overcome. We would never overcome the moral stain of re-electing genocide. It would have undercut any moral authority. It would have metastasized. As god-awful as Trump is, it was the better outcome. Now let's organize to bury fascism. Again, but this time for real. And that means ending capitalism. Wow. This is not true, is it? The U.S. government is currently planning to award Tesla a $400 million contract to buy armored Teslas. The State Department's most recent procurement forecast, updated in December 2024, names Tesla as the recipient of the largest projected contract. The anticipated award date is 9/30/2025, with a 5-year contract length. That's not Elon Musk, though. It's just one of his companies. No conflict of interest here. True. It's worth noting that this procurement forecast was revised in December 2024 when Biden was still president. The Tesla line item was last modified on December 13th. Gross.
We're in the budget wars. It's about reconciliation. Why is there such angst by some of us? You know, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I chair the Joint Economic Committee, so I'm the idiot with all the economists. I'm number 4 in Ways and Means. I'm not good at many things in life. I'm okay at math. What's going on that is stressing us? Last night I could barely sleep because I had read report after report after report, and the math was devastating. And this is what we need to understand. Here's our reality. And forgive us, we've been going as fast as we can in our office to find some way to explain what the hell's going on. At the end of this budget year, so September 30th, end of this budget year, United States debt by Congressional Budget Office is projected to be $37.2 trillion. Okay. They're projecting over the next 10 years, we add another $20 trillion. But if you then, on top of that, so the debate that's been going on is we have these provisions of the 2017 tax reform. Thank you. The 2017 tax reform that are expiring at the end of this year. If you go take it to 2035, because that's sort of the 10-year window, 9 budget years, it's another $5.5 trillion. Then you add onto that the interest, because it turns out if you were to finance it, not pay for any of it, that's another $1.3 trillion on top of that. Then if you were to come in here and then take the president's requests. So let's just, because we have a couple members here, just say, just do everything, make everyone happy, screw my retirement, the next generation. America will be fine. If you add it all up, by 2035, you have over $74 trillion in debt. You're somewhere in the 155 or so % of the entire economy is borrowed. Today, we're a little less than 100. So the point I'm trying to make here, even if you do the calculation of publicly sold debt, because as I've tried to explain, you have like the Social Security Trust Fund, which is gone in 8 years. But we borrow the money out of that, and we do pay interest on it. But if you take everything where we sell bonds to the world, to each other, to our retirement accounts, to pensions, when the day we got elected, Mr. Speaker, so long time ago, what was that, November, U.S. sovereign debt that was held by the public was around $28 trillion. These numbers right now say that number that took, 240 years of publicly held debt, we intend to double in 9 years. In 9 years, we're going to functionally add another $28 trillion of publicly held debt. Actually, a little more if we do these things on finance. Finance them and don't try to pay for them. This is my 4-minute spiel. When you see some of us stressing out, when you see some of us, he's being disharmonious. Maybe it's because I own a damn calculator. If these numbers don't make you pucker up and scare the crap out of you, you don't understand. Yet the hallways around here are full of people that demanding we give them more money. Or they want more barriers to entry. Or they don't want to change their business models. They want to do it in archaic fashions. Because it might make them have to compete.
Like, I just don't know what to say. This is all like theater. If you want to control the deficit and lower the debt, there's like 3 ways that you can do this. You can either increase your revenues, that means more taxes, or you can decrease your spending. That means you have to make actual cuts to federal programs. It's not going to be waste, fraud, and abuse. Or 3, kind of ties to number 1, you can increase the overall size of your economy, because as your economy gets bigger, then your tax receipts naturally grow as well. Like, this is what you can do. Like, these people constantly obsess over this, and I agree that this can become a problem. Maybe it's a problem now, I don't know. But then, fine, if this is a problem, then let's get serious about it and stop just fucking virtue signaling on waste, fraud, and abuse. Increase taxes, or expand your tax base, or make some significant actual cuts to government spending. But the Republicans are not willing, and Donald Trump especially hasn't shown his willingness to do any of that. And if you're unwilling to do any of that, then everything else is just a joke. This is a 41.5-minute thing. Is he going to talk about any of those 3 things? Or is it all just going to be a virtue signal on waste, fraud, and abuse? Is that what this whole thing is going to be? Or
this is no longer the next generation. This is your own retirement. Look, I accept, I'm traditionally, I tease behind this microphone, I'm pathologically optimistic. My wife and I were both 62 years old, and we have a 2.5-year-old. We've adopted, but we also have a 9-year-old. When my little boy is functionally 24 years old, the math says every single tax in America needs to be doubled just to maintain baseline services. The wheels are coming off. Do you really think the bond market? Oh, we want to keep buying U.S. sovereign debt, even though you've gone and doubled it in 9 years. You don't think we're going to start to pay? We did a math problem a couple weeks ago on this floor, and we showed that if we stressed the bond markets, if we got up to a 6% handle, and it wasn't that many decades ago, U.S. sovereign debt was kissing up around 6%. In 9 years, 45% of all U.S. tax receipts went to interest. You think this is a game? The bond market is on the edge of running this country, not us. If you remember, Congress, and you claim that you care about debt and deficits and the next generation and working people and people's retirement, and you don't have this poster up somewhere in your office, how do you understand the math? The wheels are coming off. And I'm going to show in a bunch of these slides, there's a path. We can produce some level of stabilization. It means doing really hard things, which you know how good we are at doing hard things, because once again, there'll be an army of people outside the door all upset with us because we're trying to do hard things. You've known this has been coming for decades. When I was an idiot kid, in the 80s, I remember my statistics professor. She basically did a chart. This is like 1983, saying, okay, here's baby boomers. This is going to happen. There's this huge bubble. The thing we weren't prepared for is U.S. fertility rates started to collapse in 1990. We don't have enough young people. I'm going to show some charts of how hard it is to keep up productivity and growth. And it's not just the United States. It's all across the world. There's a shortage of young people. But we're going to pretend we can just grow our way out of things. That's complete untruth.
Say bullshit.
If we do what a handful of our members are asking and just look the other way and just give everything to everyone without paying for it, and look, I think it's outrageous there's a discussion. It would be immoral, I believe, to allow the tax rates to go up on working people. But it's also immoral not to find a way to pay for it. Are you ready to condemn this country in 9 budget years, 10 calendar years, to functionally financial Armageddon? Because this is actually in the 10-year window now. This is not some theoretical number years and years and years and decades from now. It's here. And if interest rates were to move against us, it's functionally almost Armageddon. I'm going to skip. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. So think about this. Why are some of us trying so hard to get as much in the way of modernization, cost changes, those things? So we have $5.5 trillion if you do the 20.
Does the debt really matter? If the economy isn't just right at 37 trillion, then what number will it? First of all, talking about it in absolute terms doesn't matter that much. It's more like percentage of GDP that you'd probably have to consider it as. However, I imagine, well, there's two things that you should be worried about probably. One, I think you should be worried about it, maybe, but although we never can agree on if we should or shouldn't be, is that if the debt gets too high and so much of your money is going towards interest payments, that maybe that could snowball out of control in a way that becomes like uncontrollable. And now you get into some crazy inflated period where you're spending so much money to just cover the interest on your debt. That could be a concern depending on what the debt is as a percentage of GDP. There's a second thing that's like lurking though in the background now. And that's that my guess is going to be that the United States probably enjoys a lot more flexibility with our monetary policy because we're so interconnected with the rest of the world, because our economy is so large, because we have so many friends and allies like all over the planet. We enjoy our status as the global reserve currency. That probably gives us a bit more stability to our monetary policy than we deserve otherwise. Now, if Trump continues running us into this insane isolationist route where people don't trade in U.S. denominated dollars anymore, or people don't have as much faith in the U.S. economy to be stable, if the world were to just eject itself from wanting to reliably hold U.S. dollars, that could have a dramatic impact as well. For either of these things, though, like the debt getting too high or the USD no longer being the world reserve currency, these are big macro questions that I wouldn't be able to give you a good answer to. I think just both things would probably be pretty bad, would be my guess, yeah.
35 of expiring provisions that would raise taxes on our brothers and sisters in this country. We need that not to happen. But understand its actual cost. It's not only the $5.5 trillion. If you just did it, if you just pass it, it's another $1.3 trillion of interest over those 10 years. That means in 2035, the interest handle for America is $2 trillion a year. Just interest will be $2 trillion a year in 9 budget years if we don't find ways to do offsets. How can this not terrify people? Are there people in the White House that have calculators? Are brothers and sisters here? Do you really think the debt markets, we want to buy that much more U.S. sovereign bond? Look, there's a funny fact, interesting fact, it's not necessarily funny. The world today has the highest ratio of debt since the Napoleonic Wars. And if you remember your history, after that, there was years and years and years of misery as governments tried to figure out how to unwind and go to war with each other and those things because of the depressions that it caused. We're not the only country binging on debt. And I'll say this a couple times, and it's the one thing that gets me really hateful emails and text messages. 100%, well, almost 100% of the next 10 years of debt is interest and demographics. Almost all of it is Medicare. Our brothers and sisters, people like me, baby boomers, gray hair, we're moving into our earned benefits. We didn't set aside enough money, and we've been unwilling to modernize how we deliver services because it annoys the lobbyists and the people at home, and people get uncomfortable. Oh, David, you want to use technology. You don't have a choice. You just don't have a choice. And it's not my feelings, it's math. But you start to look at this. If you look at the data right now, if we were to do the expiring tax provisions, within the budget window, the United States will pay $2 trillion plus a year just in interest. And that's at today's interest rates. That's without even a calculation of raising interest rates going up. I've been trying to figure out how to sort of explain. I can say this one easier.
Okay.
We're going to come close to spending the 7% of the entire economy this year in borrowed money. If we do these things without paying for them, in 10 years, we're not going to be borrowing 7% of the economy. We're going to be borrowing around 9.2% of the economy. This is not a game. So let's actually walk through one or two more of these to try to get our heads around what's actually going on. You got to understand, you see the blue here? Okay, dark purple, if that's purple. Forgive my, this is interest. That's our debt we're adding. And here's our problem. What happens this year if we borrow a couple $1 trillion this year? You do realize half that's interest. Half of it is now interest. Interest now is the second biggest expense in the United States government. Defense is actually number 4. I always love it when I'm having a conversation with one of my friends on the left. Well, if we just cut defense, defense is now number 4 on the spend stack. Interest is number 2. And there's a couple models that if we keep borrowing and interest rates move against us in a decade or so, interest could be the number 1 expense in the United States government.
Wow.
And I've done presentation after presentation of this concept called interest fragility. I think I'm probably the only one that listened to it, and sometimes I wonder if I even listen to myself. This isn't a game. There's a reason the British government collapsed this summer. Liz Truss? Yeah, we're a hell of a lot bigger economy. Do we really think, because we have the 2 great extraordinary privileges of the reserve currency and being a country that people want to do business and live in?
Oh, shit. Oh, he's got my talking points. True.
Prosper in? Do you think we keep those things if we keep this sort of clown show going? So let's actually walk through a couple more of these, and then I'm going to try to have a little fun mocking some of the suggestions that keep coming in. Debt held by the public under alternative conditions. Trying to make increase in primary deficits. This is where, and I need to explain, this is going to be a little tricky. In 2033, because what was done in this body in lame duck, where we functionally took another couple $100 billion out of Social Security and paid it out without replacing the money, now it looks like the number is in mid-2033. Social Security trust fund is empty. CBO, now the law for Social Security says you cut seniors' benefits. Math is about 20%. So we will double senior poverty.
How old is this video? 1 day old.
The following year. But that's not how CBO is forced under the law to do the math. The math, there's an actual law that says you're not allowed to show a zero balance. That's why we're doing this. So that means in 2034, there's $600 billion of borrowing that's shoved in that's actually to make up the balance, the shortfall in Social Security. Next year, it's more. So if you add up 2023, 24, 25, there's like another 1.7 trillion because Social Security is empty. And you don't want to double senior poverty, but we're also far too fearful to actually tell our voters the truth. And the fact of the matter is, every time one of us idiots, me, gets up and tries to find a way to stabilize the Social Security Trust Fund, that side starts running attack ads on you because they care more about winning the next election than they do doubling senior poverty in America. It's just absolutely immoral. It's almost like the math. So you start to look at what's going on here. If we're really heading towards a time where just the primary deficit that's publicly sold without the other request from the president, we're at 55 plus trillion. And that's
one thing I never understand with these budget arguments is that they talk about our largest expense is Medicare and Social Security, but these programs are paid for by targeted taxes. So don't these programs already pay for themselves? Kind of. I think Social Security, if the trust fund is completely drained, I think that the current taxes would only pay about 75% of benefits. People say that it'll go bankrupt and you can't take anything. That's not true. I think it would pay for about 75%, so the payments would be reduced. I don't know as much about Medicare. I don't know if the taxes that people pay into Medicare generally pay for what Medicare ends up paying out. I'm not sure if that's the case or not.
We're playing a very dangerous game here, and yet my sense of frustration is off the charts. And look, this one's it's very simple. Within the budget window, publicly held debt, not also the borrowing from the trust funds, publicly held debt. If we were to do the expiring tax provisions without paying for them, we're at 149% of debt to GDP.
Ooh. Well, at least this guy's having a real conversation on the debt. Expiring tax provisions. He's talking about the tax jobs, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from Trump, right? If we don't pair it with spending cuts, which I don't think Trump has any plan of doing.
Publicly held debt, not also the borrowing from the trust funds. Publicly held debt. If we were to do the expiring tax provisions without paying for them, we're at 149% of debt to GDP. We will functionally have raised U.S. debt by 50% in 9 budget years. So how many members here ran on a promise of, we're going to save America. We're going to save our retirements. We're going to save our kids. We're going to save the future. We're going to pretend math doesn't exist. Because this is what's going on. So let's actually walk through some of the ideas that have been coming into our office. And when I do this, yeah, there's going to be a little tone.
Ooh, now that he disagrees with Trump, he's making a good point, but not prior to that. What? He's been making a decent point the whole time. My biggest criticism of people who talk about shit like this are people who just say waste, fraud, and abuse is going to save us money. That's a retard talking point. I don't think this guy's brought that up a single time. His whole point is that there probably have to be cuts made in programs that people don't want to make cuts for, like Medicare. That's been his point the entire time. Have you been listening, or do you hear anything, or do you just hear whether or not it's pro-Trump or anti-Trump? Is that how you filter every single fucking political statement through your ears? It's like, is it pro-Trump or anti-Trump? And then that decides if it's good or bad? Like,
On sarcasm, but it's more for my own personal amusement. Trying to help people understand how big 12 zeros is. Trying to understand how difficult this math is. Because if I watch one more idiot on talk or cable television saying, all we have to do is this, look how wonderful that is, that's not the math. So let's actually have a little fun here. Okay, great. Wall Street Journal yesterday said, hey, there's 40,000 federal employees which have said they'll take a retirement package. Okay. I'm ignoring, hey, if they took the package today, we pay them through the rest of the year. I'm just ignoring that math. But what is 40,000 federal employees times an average salary? I think we used 106,000, which we got from one of the reports, and you just multiply that. And understand, and this is the conservative number, we're borrowing about $6 billion a day. That 40,000 federal employees leaving is a single day of borrowing. For an entire year, all those folks leaving, single day of borrowing. You got 12 hours or 24 hours of borrowing by 40,000 federal employees leaving. Yet I watched someone on television last night saying, well, look, we're going to make a huge dent in the U.S. deficit with these 40,000 taking early retirement. It's one day of borrowing. That's not spending, borrowing. And remember, by the end of the decade, that borrowing's up per day dramatically. Take this in. This is one of the grand solutions. Now, the point I want to make is you probably have to do it. You got to do all of them. It's going to be dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of things all stacked up just to provide some stability. Because can we, as a country, get back to just borrowing about 3% of our economy a year instead of 7, or God forbid, a decade from now over 9? But you got to stop lying to each other. Our staffs have to stop lying to us. The press has to stop making crap up. And we got to help the public understand the scale of what the hell's going on. 40,000 employees taking early retirement. The salary savings is one day of borrowing. So let's have a little more fun. Okay, so someone yesterday said, okay, let's get rid of the federal subsidy on tax-exempt bonds for stadiums. Okay, great. We calculate that's about 6 or 7 seconds of borrowing for a year. 7 seconds. But this is worthy. Yeah, I'm going to throw it in the stack.
oh shit, well, this guy was part of literally writing the, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I was proud to help write the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act legislation that was signed into law in 2017. Good one. Good job. Okay, I don't want to watch the rest of this. Does he get into what the solution is, or what does he say?
Now is getting old, and the numbers are actually worse. They lie about it. We campaigned, we won. The American people gave us the House, they gave us the Senate, they gave us the presidency. And suddenly, the obligation, we did all this moralizing, and now we run away from the difficulty. So let's actually now have the other thing where I'm going to start to really make a couple of my brothers and sisters annoyed around here. United States, according to the Census Bureau from last month, will have more deaths than births in 8 years.
Wow.
Not a single country in the world, and this is not just the United States, it's basically all the industrialized countries, and much of the world is way ahead of us in this almost dystopian collapse of there being young people. No other country has actually been able to change natalist fertility rates, whatever pop culture word you want to use. There's countries out there that on your third child, they buy you a house, and all they did is move fertility forward, and boom, a couple years later, they just moved back to the mean.
This guy sounds like, or maybe these are congressmen who aren't like TV famous. This guy sounds like he has like a good general base of knowledge at least. Like he doesn't sound like a fucking retard. Although, if he voted for that or helped author that tax cut and then they didn't pair it with any spending cuts, I don't know what he's planning or how he's ever planning on this reigning and spending it all. But at least like this point that he's bringing up is true as well. One of the biggest issues related to fertility, at least as far as I'm aware, because I remember arguing with the Nazis about this, it's actually incredibly fucking difficult to have the government just get people to make more kids. Like, I don't think anybody has ever been able to do it. They tried it in fascist Italy. I think Mussolini had a huge program for it. Like, other countries have tried to incentivize it in different ways. And it's just, like, I don't know if anybody's ever been able to successfully do this. Like, I think the kids thing is a huge economic organization problem plus culture thing. But I don't know if any country's been able to do this ever with any kind of policy. And that's what he's bringing up now.
They buy you a house, and all they did is move fertility forward, and boom, a couple years later, they just moved back to the mean. Why is this a big deal? When you start to understand total fertility rates and what it means to being able to grow an economy, I'm begging you, give this a chance. If you're watching this, you're obviously unusual, you're smart. If you have a shortage of young people in your country, how do you grow? How do you reach productivity? And there becomes, we can do it by policy. You're not going to have more children, but are you willing to make it easier to adopt technology? Are you going to be fearful of AI, machine learning? Are you going to allow synthetic biology to cure diseases? Are you going to promote automation everywhere you can because you're going to have a shortage of workers? Are we going to remove the regulatory barriers, the financing barriers to basically having a much more productive society? Because if you don't, there's absolutely no way you can make the math work. This is the reality. And a couple weeks ago, I did a whole series of charts showing if the United States would take on the rest of the world. Because you understand, besides the tax arbitrage the world uses by refunding their value-added tax, yet when we send them something, they put it on. So there's already this tax arbitrage the rest of the world uses on us. The other stupidity we engage in this country is we educate people in our fine universities, and we send them home to compete with us. Wall Street Journal today actually has an article on drug discovery and drug research and how fast China is basically competing with us now in new biologics and those things. And the basic premise is that we educated the very people that are competing with us because we sent them home because we're idiots. And yet I will get folks who will now...
Like, this is a really, really, really good point. Who is this guy? He's a Republican. He doesn't sound like oh, he's from Arizona. Arizona's a very purplish state, right? Like, we want to be competitive in all these areas, but we want to also ship all the illegal immigrants back. We want to send everybody home. We don't want people coming to our schools from other countries anymore. We want to lock down our borders. We don't want H-1B workers. We don't want any of these people. Like, it's a good point. It's true.
We engage in this country is we educate people in our fine universities, and we send them home to compete with us. Wall Street Journal today actually has an article on drug discovery and drug research and how fast China is basically competing with us now in new...
What are these tweets, though? 2, if, as many of us suspect, Dima KKK rats have been padding the rolls. Holy shit. Does he believe in the 2020 election steal or whatever? Oh, man.
Biologics and those things. And the basic premise is that we educated the very people that are competing with us.
Isn't that a different guy? Representative Schweikert. Wait, is this a different guy? Larry Schweikert. Oh, wait. This isn't the same guy. Is it? No. Wait, who linked this? Fucking retards. Never mind.
Because we sent them home because we're idiots. And yet I will get folks who will now, right now, pounding out texts saying, what? I don't want foreigners in there. Do you want us to be able to pay your Medicare bills?
Oof. Like, this is a really unpopular talking point, but it's true. Like, if you wanted to shore up Medicare and Social Security right now, the quickest and easiest way to do it would be a path to amnesty for every single illegal in the country. That's like your number one, like, you just expanded your young voters, or not your young voters, you just expanded your young tax base by like 15 million people to pay into FICA. Like, it would be the number one quickest way to have a huge surge of money. And these people aren't drawing down fucking Social Security and Medicare. These people are young and working. But
because if we don't get the growth. So it turns out, what are the two extraordinary privileges of the United States? It's our currency. The world borrows and trades and denominates in U.S. currency.
Yep. But for how long?
And the economists will tell you it's worth even more than being the reserve currency of the world. People want to do their business, their investments, bring their
because we have a big economy, yeah.
Their passions, their entrepreneurialism to the United States.
But tariffs and isolationism like threaten both of those things.
So in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the world knifed each other for hydrocarbons, oil. Last decade, we competed, whether you know it about, for rare earths. The rest of the world figured this out about 10 years ago when Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, Canada all moved to talent-based, STEM-based systems of saying they need smart people to be able to continue to grow.
And in the U.S., we're like, I need manufacturing. I need to manufacture. I need to steal here. I'm going to make a steal in U.S.
I think the United States is the only major country still doing a familial-based immigration system.
Oh
and
my
this upsets people when I
God, he's even bringing up immigration reform. True. Why do we do family-based immigration? If we're worried about Mexico, I've said this a million times. If we're worried about Mexico stealing all of our fucking factory investments, why not just let them all fucking come here and work? Fuck it, if you want to come to the U.S. and work, and you're Mexican, just fucking come up here and do it. Let's do it. And then we'll build the factories up here, and they can work them up here.
The United States is the only major country still doing a familial-based immigration system. And this upsets people when I say this. I want to be able to sponsor my grandma. Great. I'm sure she's lovely. But from an economist standpoint, if we are going to survive as an economy, and particularly if we're about to put together a package on how we're going to cover the $5.5 trillion of expiring provisions by saying, here's the cuts, and we're going to build growth in, are we willing to do the things that are required to hit that growth number? Well, it turns out, yes. Modernizing regulation, great. Turns out, as an economist, you can't hit the number without a talent-based, STEM-based immigration system. You just can't.
Oof.
Because here's your problem. We built the models. So we're going to extend expensing for research and development, so we're doing things better, faster, cheaper. What happens when the very companies that are doing that, the research labs that are doing it, continue to show up in my office and say, we can't get enough people. We're being squeezed. We're going to have to do part of the research on the other side of the world.
True. A lot of your huge funding cuts from the NIH and everything are playing into this. A lot of huge cuts into H-1B or other talent-based, worker-based visa cuts are like playing into this. Yeah.
Lost our minds. Oh, but David, you can't tell that. That will upset someone. Look, the chaos that was created at the border over the last 4 years crushed the working poor because the working poor sells their talents, their willingness to show up. And now you have millions and millions and millions of other entries. So there's a couple great articles out there basically talking about the working poor's wage growth will probably be flat for the next decade. But there's also part of that same report says you're getting close, I think it was $900 billion, almost $1 trillion over 10 years of new tax receipts if you move to a STEM-based, talent-based immigration system. And the next decade, it's parabolic. It just explodes because that way you're integrated in the economy. Are we allowed to have that conversation, Mr. Speaker, saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to tell ourselves we're going to start growing at these great rates, are we going to do the very tools that allow us to grow, that allow us to prosper, to allow us to raise the productivity? Because, and this chart I know is almost impossible to read. Its punchline is very simple. Unless we have this productivity spike, we're going to get poor. We see it around the world. That productivity, the ability to have that productivity growth is how you keep up standards of living. We've had a great pop the last couple of years. The investments in AI, those things. But are we going to keep it up? Are we basically going to give our competitive advantage to the rest of the world because we're going to educate the very talent that's bringing it to us and send them home? So, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping I accomplished 3 things here. To give you a sense of how just absolutely brutal the math is and why it's absolutely necessary we do the moral thing of reduce the spending, modernize the way we deliver services, make the tax code actually grow, and then deal with the reality of what drives our debt and deficits, and then deal with the reality of how we maximize growth and productivity and wealth. Prosperity is moral. I actually believe it is actually the American ethos. My kids, your kids deserve to be more prosperous than the generation before them. And every data point we hold says our kids will be poorer than our generation. Is that the morality we've decided to bathe in? And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Damn. Apparently we're starting anything else at 7:15 tonight.